Today, we're looking at a blue ink by Akkerman. It's their Dutch Masters #1, because I doubt I can pronounce them. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. There's timestamps down below where you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Now you can follow me on Instagram as an ink guy, and if you like fountain pen ink reviews, don't forget to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Lamy All-Star with a broad nib, wrote with it for the day, and then used it to take my notes for this video. In order to standardize, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in this first writing sample. There will be more writing samples on different papers later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub as far as its base tone. The extra fine has no feather spread, halo sheen, and a ton of beautiful shading, like brown starts dark and works its way light. Quick started light and worked its way dark. Jumps has a very light part right in the middle of it. Nice shading, 8 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo, sheen, and still a bunch of great shading. Brown starts dark, gets light, gets dark again. Dog starts dark and gets light at the G. Look at how the 7 starts light and works its way dark moving down. Very nice shading here, and 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we do get plenty of color variation. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread. It has halo all over it, a lot of halo. I wasn't expecting it, but there is a lot of halo there. No sheen, no shading with the stub. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub. The extra fine has no feather spread, halo sheen. Only a few spots of shading to talk about, like the top of the F is darker, the Q and the K is darker, the T is lighter than the he. Maybe, you know what, there's a whole lot more shading here in the extra fine than I had originally thought and wrote down. Lazy starts dark, works its way lighter, and at the bottom of the Z it's darker again. So it's more shading than I originally wrote down in my notes, and 13 seconds to dry. Now the medium is darker than the extra fine, just a tad lighter than the stub. The medium has no feather, no spread, halo all over it. Plenty of halo spots, great halo. No sheen, plenty of good shading. Not too bad on the shading, considering it gets hidden because of the halo. The Q the quick starts dark, goes to a midtone, gets dark. So instead of going darks and lights, we're using midtones. Brown starts dark, goes to midtone. Jumps, starts midtone, gets very dark. 39 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine shows plenty of color variation, and we got some. The scrubby of the medium shows a little color variation, and again, we do see it. It's not the light and the dark, it's the midtone and the dark. And the medium scrubby shows all that halo that we got in the writing. Very nice. Rhodia. No bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a whole lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some spots of shading, like the word quick starts dark, goes light, goes dark. Brown starts dark, works its way light. Fox, dark to light to dark. Nice within the writing. Subtle. 9 seconds to dry. Medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shading. 18 seconds to dry. The extra fine scrubby shows us a lot of color variation, and there's a lot to get here. The medium shows us none, and we got none. I agree with Vita. I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this kind of blue, slightly leaning purple at the bottom. It does create a line at the bottom where it's immediately joined with this filter paper, but it pushes its way up some, and then we see this very thin line of a very, very light minty green, and then a bright blue. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the separation of these colors you really get to see even better here. That kind of leaning purple a little bit line at the bottom is much darker, much more there. Not a lot of it has pushed its way up, although it has. And then you more clearly get to see that minty green and that very highlighter type blue at the top. Makes you worry about that purpley tone on the bottom. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, there's a ton of spread and feathers and blowout of the lowercase h. I don't know that I would use this as a note taker if I go back and highlight. Now, water is completely reactivating and lifting it off the page. It hasn't gotten it entirely yet with only 30 seconds. But if you look up at the top, you are definitely seeing the white of the paper coming through. That means that pen flush isn't going to be needed, but it didn't do anything more than water did. And the 1/3 bleach solution, yes, it completely removed it from the paper, but you're not going to need it to get it out of your pen. I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I'll link that somewhere here. And for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Put the data onto a bell curve or standard deviation for it to be easily understood. Akkerman Dutch Masters Ceruleum Blouw von Vermeer, or number 1, has a viscosity of 2.2, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Akkerman Dutch Masters number 1 has an average dry time of 17 seconds, making it not just normal, but average. Instead of finding inks that look like Akkerman Dutch Masters number 1, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted something different, like a nice yellow, and went with Krishna's Dance Hudak. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, Monokaki, and Moji paper. Here we're looking at it on the yellow Rhodia paper, and as I've done before, I'm really doing this to see what kind of tone change we might go through for having a yellow background. And we're not really seeing a difference in the stub. And we definitely see difference in both the extra fine and the medium. Now the extra fine goes from a definite blue to an aquamarine, a very nice aquamarine. And the medium goes from that same darker definite blue to a darker, more definite aquamarine color. So that yellow backdrop really has altered the tone of this ink. Now we have the Monokaki paper. We have no bleeding. We do have quite a bit of ghosting. I don't know that it stops everybody from using the back of the page. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and a lot of shading. Like Quick starts dark, gets light, gets dark, and Brown starts dark and goes light. Fox starts dark, gets light in the bottom of the X, and stays light, bottom of the F, stays light until we reach the X. It's got some very nice shading in the writing, and 6 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine, probably about the same-ish, as the 1.1 with no feather spread halo sheen. It does offer quite a few spots of shading. It's just more subtle. Like the T in the second the here is a little bit lighter than the he. Brown, the B-R-O, first part of O, is darker than the rest of the word brown, but just by a little bit. It's a very subtle in shading. 10 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows color variation, looking far left to far right. The medium shows a lot more. We did get color variation in both the writings. Last up is emoji paper, with no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The medium is a lot darker than the extra fine and a lot darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. Now the scrubby for both show us a lot of color variation for both of them, but it's not coming through in the writing sample at all. And that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Akkerman Dutch Masters number 1? It is a very nice blue. It's well behaved. It looks nice on the page. It does look like just any other blue. It offers some shading from time to time, which is nice. Those bottles are just so cool. So what pen and nib give the best writing experience with this ink? I found a regular or medium flow medium nib did best. It put down a very nice tone and it offered some shading every now and then, which is nice to look at. I appreciate shading over every other feature an ink can have. If you've enjoyed this video, remember, I like thumbs up, you like thumbs up, everybody likes thumbs up. Unless you didn't like it, then give me the thumbs down. Both are good. Thanks for watching. So what do I think of Akkerman's Dutch Masters number blue?